The following hour is brought to you by MidasResources.com. Call Midas Resources today to protect your future at 1-800-686-2237.
Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we have a remarkable guest for you. We're going to have him on regularly. Michael Connolly from the U.S. Justice Foundation. Michael's been on a number of times before, and you go to USJF, USJF.net, USJF.net. Michael, you've got the floor. You've got a lot of topics to talk about today. Things that are beyond extremis. We have, the term Bill Clinton of Obama, of rookie. This man and his entire regime, from Valerie Jarrett on down, are so incompetent, so corrupt, so evil. It's beyond the corruption of previous administrations of George Bush, Bill Clinton, Herbert Walker Bush, etc., and the criminality, the cover-ups. He talked about transparency of his administration. It's the most non-transparent, opaque, and evil, moving toward a totalitarian regime. The kind of harassment of veterans is a good example. So let's get into the veteran issue, and then we'll move into the issue of impeachment of this maniac. We have a situation now of building wars in the Middle East where he wants to illegally deploy troops, so-called to protect the U.S. embassy there, 275 troops. But this is a start with the George H.W. Bush supercarrier and a second carrier heading toward the Gulf, and much more. The deployment of troops for a so-called war game in the area of western Ukraine that's going to bring us to the brink of World War III. And it just seems to never end. He busts the budget with releasing 76,000 illegal aliens that are felons, rather than keeping them in civil detention or deporting them. And it's a signal to people in Central and South America, hey, dump your kids across the border. And Obama just says, hey, I need $1.6 billion. No, I need $2 billion. And he's going to put them in foster care rather than trying to help the people in their country get food supplies so people can keep their kids at home. I think it's insane. This man is so incompetent. His administration is so evil. They're literally marching us toward devastation.
Well, absolutely, and it's deliberate. This is a part of the plan, and what's to overwhelm our borders, to divert attention from the scandals going on in his administration, Benghazi, IRS, Veterans Administration, you name it.
Yeah, and they've lost all the emails, too. I mean, I can't believe it that the so-called IRS now claims that all the emails with Valerie Jarrett, they've lost all of a sudden.
Yeah, well, they've lost not only lost learners' emails, but they've lost supposedly emails of all the employees that were directly involved in this, all the high-level employees. And, of course, that's just an out-and-out lie, and ISIS says it's a lie, but whether or not the improvement's another matter.
Well, why don't they just start slapping people with zip ties and put them in prison? When they have this kind of level of contempt of Congress, that's a federal crime. Why aren't we doing something about it?
Well, the problem is that Congress can't put somebody into prison. They have to get the Justice Department to do it. And Eric Holder is part of the cover-up. So
why don't we just impeach
as long as Eric Holder's in office.
Eric Holder needs to be removed. We need to do a Holderectomy and an Abominectomy. We have a multi-point catastrophe here brewing, and this entire regime is literally not only that destroying the Democratic Party. We talked about that the first hour with Harley Schlanger, and even Maxine Waters, the Democratic black politician, basically saying, "Hey, we gotta turn the other way." Even people like Dianne Feinstein that are deep into the administration are totally beside herself, angry over the CIA and the actions of the federal government in terms against her personally. I mean, it's just ridiculous what's going on.
It is, and of course you got the Bergdahl thing. That angered a lot of Democrats in Congress because there's a specific federal law which Obama signed. Saying that he has to notify Congress 30 days before releasing anybody from Gitmo. And, of course, he didn't do that. He didn't notify anybody in Congress at all about this. He just did it. And that's an example of the lawlessness of this administration.
Right.
And what he's doing to our veterans is just horrendous. I mean,
let's go through that
all the way back to 2009 when Eric Holder started going to the states and telling the secretaries of state, you don't have to comply with federal law that requires you to send out absentee ballots to members of the military 45 days in advance of an election. We're not going to enforce that. Don't comply with it. So a lot of states did not comply with it in 2010 and 2012. And as a result, in Ohio, for example, alone, we understand there were 100,000 votes of active military personnel that were not counted. And then you have the VA sending out these letters to veterans saying that we're going to declare you incompetent because of your physical and mental disabilities, incompetent to handle your own financial affairs. We're going to appoint a fiduciary to represent you. And the letter goes on to say, by the way, once we do that, you can no longer own, possess, transport, or purchase firearms or ammunition. If you do, you're guilty of a felony. And there's no due process here. The veterans have 60 days, or they did have 60 days, to prove that they're competent, which is not the requirement under the law. It's supposed to be the government that proves they're incompetent, and the government's supposed to prove that they're mentally defective to the point of being a danger to themselves or others in order to be put on the NICS list. And that's the list of people that cannot purchase firearms legally. Instead, the government is saying, we're going to declare you incompetent because you have minor PTSD, which is not even considered a mental illness, or because at some time you were depressed, or simply because you let your spouses pay the family bills. And once you're declared incompetent, you lose these rights. Now we're finding out that they're also telling veterans that they're going to lose their passports, they're going to be put on the do-not-fly list, they're being treated as terrorists. There are 159,000 veterans right now on the NICS list, and 99.9% of them, we estimate, do not belong there. There's no adjudication process as required by law. Eric Holder said in 2009, anybody can declare a veteran incompetent, anybody who works for the federal government, even as an independent contractor. So now in the last 2 weeks, we've learned that independent contractors being hired by the VA and the Department of Defense, they're sending letters to the veterans saying they're going to be declared incompetent. They're only giving them 5 days to respond.
You're kidding.
Prove themselves competent. And then if they try to respond, we were prepared a response for one veteran, sent it to them, asked for a 90-day extension, and they didn't even read the letter. They just said extension denied. So, this is horrendous, and then veterans are losing their rights all over the country. It's not just veterans. We have a woman from Virginia we represent. Her husband was killed in Vietnam. She's been receiving veterans benefits for years. She goes to the VA one day, and they ask her, how do you handle paying your bills? And she says, it's simple. It's all automated. Everything's paid out of my checking account by the bank at the beginning of every month. I got a copy of the letter they sent her telling her for that reason they're declaring her incompetent and she can no longer own a firearm. And they're appointing a fiduciary to represent her.
No.
These fiduciaries are apparently they used to be family members, because the whole idea behind the fiduciary program was to take care of elderly veterans who might be suffering from dementia and couldn't handle their own affairs. And now they're appointing fiduciaries who are former employees of the VA or sometimes current employees. We have a 93-year-old World War II veteran that we were representing who somebody came to him from the VA, an employee, and said, we're going to declare you incompetent. I'm going to take over handling your affairs. And the veteran raised all kinds of cane about that. And the guy said, well, tell you what, we'll let you pay the bills, but I'm going to oversee everything. So the next thing this veteran knows, he stops getting his checks, his benefit checks. $2,800 a year. A month. He's got throat cancer. He needs that money to help get treatment. The checks stop coming. 5 months later, he finds out from his bank what's happened to the checks. They were diverted to another checking account in another state that is in the name of the wife of the VA representative who's supposed to be taking care of this man.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
And we're getting more and more reports about that sort of thing. Millions of dollars may be missing from these veterans. By the way, the fiduciaries get paid 5% of the veterans' benefits for doing this. So, we're just uncovering one scandal after another. Veterans are being asked, and this is on orders from the White House, when they go to the VA, do you own a firearm? We had some Marines recently tell me that they were asked also, how do you feel about the federal government? How do you feel about the Obama administration? And we have 3 instances now that we have confirmed where veterans were told to take their clothes off so they could be strip searched for radical tattoos.
My. It sounds like the worst of The regimes of the worst of Soviet Russia and Nazi Germany rising in our midst. I can't believe it.
Do you feel the aches and pains of your age? Do you often feel tired, and is your mind often clouded and forgetful? Well, it's time to stop the clock on aging with a proven system.
Welcome back, and Michael, I know we talk about how desperately bad things are, but they're even worse than you can even lay out in your articles at USJF.net. What's going to happen? Because these things have gone on. Darrell Issa's got a committee right now that's moving forward. There's so many scandals. We've got Fast and Furious, we've got Benghazi, we've got the IRS scandal. Cover-ups everywhere. This is the most non-transparent administration probably in American history. And there's been a string of bad administrations, but this one tops them all. Obama literally is acting right now like a dictator. Even the declaration of war, he doesn't even go to Congress. He just talks to a few people in Congress and Senate and say, yeah, okay, it's a go. And then starts to deploy the first edge of the wedge, 275 troops to so-called protect our embassy. Before you know it, you got the George H.W. Bush who's talking about targeting medium range Harpoon missiles and other advanced missiles against these specific targets. You got a civil insurrection. If you try to start attacking targets, you're going to kill a ton of civilians and piss off a lot of people in the Middle East. This is not going to solve the problem. And then it turns out our ally in it is Iran, who we've been talking about targeting along with Syria. This is going to be real nuts. And, of course, if we do target these nations, they're going to release biological weapons on our population. We're going to see millions of Americans die with the poor man's nuke. And we're going to see the exchange of Shaheed-3 missiles that can carry dirty bombs and Cobalt-60, can carry Pakistani nukes, which the Pakistanis have promised the Iranians, and will carry the Alexander and the advanced missile systems of the P-300 system that the Russians gave the Syrians and Iranians that are going to knock down our missiles, our aircraft, and take our Navy and put it to the bottom of the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. I think we're really going to be degraded here. We're really going to get embarrassed here. This is going to be more embarrassing than Vietnam or Korea. It's going to be a real mess, and it's going to bankrupt our nation. We're at the point now where, as Europe goes under, which is almost certainly going to happen by this fall now, with the bail-in, that the combination of the policies of Obama, who literally has no sense whatsoever, a good example is the Unaffordable Care Act, and now they have got a total disaster with the Veterans Administration, which isn't getting any better. I mean, we've seen it for years. I used to call it the very awful hospital system. Who's going to do something? How is this going to happen?
Well, the problem we have is that Obama already considers himself a dictator. He issues these executive orders all over the place, which violate the Constitution. He took the same oath of office I did as when I joined the military, and that is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Right. Now, people do not know, most people don't know that there is a federal statute out there that makes it a crime to violate that oath of office. You can be put in jail for up to a year, and fined up to $10,000 if you do anything to denigrate the Constitution or try to destroy our constitutional republic. This man does that on a daily basis. I have prepared, and they're on our website at USJF.net, formal articles of impeachment. And these include all types of things that Obama's done, the executive orders he issues to take over the auto industry, his actions of going to war in Libya without congressional approval, his lies, his scandals, his cover-ups, all that violate his oath of office. And I sent these articles out. We sent them out to a number of different members of Congress, and initially did not get a response. But now we have learned, just within the last week and a half, that several members of Congress have read these articles, have sent them to the House Judiciary Committee for review, and some people have talked to the House Judiciary Committee staff members, and they're saying they're looking at them, they want to do this right, and they're encouraging people to contact their members of Congress, particularly if they're on the Judiciary Committee, and telling them to vote out articles of impeachment. Now, I don't know that this is going to happen before the election. I doubt it. But here's the reason we're pushing for these. And people say, well, you know that it's not going to happen, because even if the House votes by just takes a majority to impeach the president, there has to be a full-scale trial in the Senate, and 2/3 of the Senate have to convict Obama and remove him from office. And that won't happen with the current Senate. Probably wouldn't happen even if we take over, the Republicans take over the Senate in the fall. But here's the deal. Once the House votes these articles of impeachment, they can appoint special prosecutors that would have extraordinary subpoena powers much greater than the House committees have. They're going to be able to break through executive privilege. They're going to be able to get documents and get testimony on Operations Fast and Furious, Benghazi, the VA scandal, the Department of Justice targeting reporters. All of this would be able to come out. It would be presented at a public hearing, because it's going to be a public trial in the Senate. And people would finally find out who this man is and what he's trying to do to our country. And so that's why we're pushing this, because it's important. And there's another plus to this. If Obama's having to spend all of his time trying to keep from being impeached and removed from office, then he's not going to be able to do a lot of the damage that he's planning to do in the last 3 years of his term.
Exactly. And this is really important. He's acting as a proxy for George Soros and the international bankers. They're in a desperate move because they're in the end game of their financial game, and literally their last pullout is to start economic chaos, bail-ins, and war. We're on literally, I have an echo of the 1914 situation. I think we're heading toward World War. I see all the parties drawing there, and we won't survive it. We'll have, as this continues, after Obama is gone, perhaps, or maybe before, we'll have a thermonuclear, biological, and chemical exchange. We will have devastation of biological weapons released on American soil. We will have millions dead. We will have American bases hit with advanced missiles from Iran and Syria and Hezbollah. We will see Israel, the state of Israel, disappear, will no longer exist. Even if all our advanced nuclear weapons, they can turn, as in 7,000 miles, all major Islamic cities into obsidian glass, they will all die, except those in bunkers. And the few left there will wish, as they say, the living will envy the dead. That's how bad it'll be. And people just think, oh, well, this can't happen. I said, yes, we have a president that's so evil, so incompetent, such a prostitute, to whatever they want him to do, he'll just do, without any common sense or decency. And he's supposedly a constitutional attorney. If he's a constitutional attorney, he's doing everything to destroy every fragment, every article of the Constitution. It's amazing, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And he's following Adolf Hitler's playbook. I mean, I know the man doesn't have a Bible by his bed in the White House, but on his nightstand, I think he's probably got a copy of Mein Kampf, which was Adolf Hitler's book, and it was the way he described the way he was going to take over Germany and how he ultimately did. And if you recall, Adolf Hitler was elected chancellor. First thing he did was to take over health care and start declaring people mentally ill who opposed him. And the second thing he did was disarm the German people, beginning with the veterans, because he was afraid of the veterans, because they took an oath of office similar to ours. And then he started, purging the military, or high-ranking officers that were loyal to the country and not to him.
Amazing. Back in a moment. Stay tuned. USJF.net. Michael Connolly, attorney for the U.S. Justice Foundation. Back in just a moment.
What a glorious time to be free. What a beautiful world this will be.
What good is a Big Berkey water filter?
We get that question a lot here at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. And in a word, the answer is protection. Protection from water main breaks, E. coli contamination, environmental chemical spills, pesticide runoff, chlorine taste and smell.
Welcome back. Would it be instructive, Michael, to proceed with going through some of the step-by-step points of the articles of impeachment? Because I think it'll just give an entire panorama of the insanity and the evil and the objectives. If I was to, let's say, be a historian traveling from another time in history and look at America right now, I would say this president and the rate that he's going hates America, hates the Constitution, and would like to be the last president after he trashes the nation so it's no longer viable financially, militarily, or constitutionally to be a constitutional republic with the rule of law. He violates laws. He puts even in his own laws and violates them within 30 days. So let's go through, if we can, some of these points that you put in your articles.
Well, to begin with, I point out, this is the first thing I point out in the articles of impeachment, that shortly after being sworn into office, he started appointing czars. Now, these are people that he appoints to executive areas of the government, to the executive branch, to run departments that they create. They have a budget that is unsupervised by the Congress, and basically nobody really knows what they're doing. He appointed about 45 of these. Now, under the Constitution, all executive appointments must be approved by the United States Senate by a majority vote, unless the Senate specifically says you don't have to submit this person to us for approval. So that right there was a violation of the Constitution, and I frankly was appalled that no member of the United States Senate didn't stand up and file a suit against the president saying, look, this is part of my duty under the Constitution to represent my constituents in my state and decide whether or not you're appointing the right people to the executive branch. That was number one. But Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, which basically sets forward the powers of the president, says that the President of the United States shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. In other words, that's his main job, and that is to enforce and execute the laws passed by Congress. It doesn't say he can amend those laws on his own. It doesn't say he can decide which ones to enforce and which not to. It doesn't say he can make new laws. Yet he does all of this.
Right. He's amended the law for the American, the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, which they call Obamacare, so many times it's just ridiculous. It doesn't even resemble what it was originally passed by Congress, which Nancy Pelosi made the insane statement, you've got to pass it so you can read the 3,000-plus page document to actually find out what's in it. I'm thinking the woman is insane. It's like she may have had a lobotomy along with her plastic surgery. It's crazy.
Well, he's amended it, like you say, about 40 times. And immigration laws, he's just ignoring our immigration laws. And he basically passed the DREAM Act by executive order, something that Congress refused to pass. He has opened our borders up. We're under attack from our southern border, across our southern border. He's done that in violation of his obligation to enforce the laws passed by Congress. Defense of Marriage Act. He and Eric Holder refused to defend it in court. Now, that's impeachable offense for Eric Holder, too, because he is constitutionally obligated to defend the laws passed by Congress. That's his primary job, and he refused to do that. The legislative branch of government, is given powers in Article 1 of the Constitution, and basically those powers are exclusive to them. And the president cannot usurp those powers, but he's doing it. He ordered, for example, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to implement the cap-and-trade bill, which was passed by the House when the Democrats controlled it, but defeated in a Democrat-controlled Senate because so many Democrats were even scared of this. He's implementing it through the EPA on his own, and we're having serious consequences here in Texas. He's ordered implementation of portions of the DREAM Act. He orchestrated in 2009 a takeover of a major part of the automobile industry. He put a moratorium on his own, not with Congress's approval, of oil and gas production.
Right. At the same time, he's blocking the XL pipeline.
And even in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
He's refused to allow the Keystone Pipeline to be built. Again, this is not something that he should really have the decision on.
Right.
But that's, thousands of jobs could be created there, plus he would lessen our dependence on foreign oil. On March 16th of 2012, he signed an executive order giving himself extraordinary powers to control and allocate resources such as food, water, energy, and healthcare resources. And this is something, he did in the interest of some vague national security issues that he talks about. But it amounts to a complete takeover of the U.S. economy. And he was given authority in the National Defense Authorization Act because the White House pushed for it and Congress stupidly passed it. He's been given authority to order U.S. soldiers to arrest American citizens on American soil and hold them indefinitely without being charged, without any attorneys being involved. Just hold them indefinitely, which violates all kinds of parts of the Constitution.
Wow.
In July 6th of 2012, he signed an executive order giving himself and the executive branch the power to control all methods of communication. He's also ordering the FCC to take over control of the Internet, to control content, even though the Supreme Court of the United States has said the FCC has no authority over the Internet.
Right.
January 6, 2013, he signs an executive order that contains 23 actions designed to limit the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Now, the Second Amendment of the Constitution, the Supreme Court has twice held it is an individual right, it is not a collective right, and it cannot be infringed upon. That's what the Constitution says. Unfortunately, it's being infringed upon every day by Obama and his executive orders. Now he's got Eric Holder basically strong-arming the banks and financial institutions to not grant lines of credit to gun dealers, licensed legal gun dealers, to not allow them to run credit cards. It's one assault after another. And he's...
Wow, these are so over the top. I mean, we're literally seeing almost like history being made, almost like the rise of the Reich.
Exactly. Two things, recent things that the U.S. Justice Foundation has been involved in, we opposed because Obama's ordering his agencies to make all kinds of new laws or to amend existing laws and regulations. Two examples, HHS. Obama signed an executive order to this effect, and HHS, to implement it, wants to change their rules to change the law, the HIPAA law, which protects our medical privacy. What they want to do is not only allow but encourage doctors and hospitals to turn over to the FBI any medical records on anybody that's ever gone to the doctor and said, I'm feeling depressed, even if they're not treated for it, or they've taken certain drugs for ADD or ADHD when they were younger, or, any reason whatsoever, they're going to report this to the FBI so they can take these people and put them on the list of people that cannot legally purchase firearms.
Wow.
We did a memorandum opposing that. Now, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is taking it one step further, and this is right in the lines of Adolf Hitler. They are changing the definition of adjudication of mental illness to the point of being in danger of themselves or others. What they're saying is if you have ever been involuntarily sent to see a psychiatrist, and they're really trying to broaden it to include if you've ever seen a psychiatrist, voluntarily or involuntarily, they want that reported to the FBI. For example, this is what this would do. When I practiced law in Louisiana, I did the little family law as I could because I didn't like it. My specialty was constitutional law, but I had to pay the bills. And routinely in divorce cases, when custody of children was in dispute, judges would order all of the family members, parents and children, to go be evaluated by a psychologist, simply for the purpose of finding out if everybody was okay, make sure there was no child abuse going on, and help the judge decide who would get custody or whether it be joint custody.
Right.
Under the new rules by the ATF, you would be reported to the ATF as being mentally defective.
Wow. That's a pretty broad way of grabbing everybody and taking away all their rights. Amazing.
What if Americans could have A, better health, B, a lower incidence of cancer?
This has got a committee that's moving forward. The impeachment process, can this get started like right away before the election? We're now into June. It's not many months before the election. And this could have a dramatic effect. If you have the special prosecutor pulling out these documents, this will tilt the election dramatically. It'll put a microscope on Obama, so it'll make it much harder for him to prosecute expanding the war in the Middle East and the Ukraine. It'll make it much harder for him to follow international banker policy that's basically going to continue to destroy America, especially if the move is in hour one we talked about with Harley Schlanger, the bail-in policy and the austerity fascism of Europe spreading as a contagion here to America. We already see it with the VA, which has not built a new hospital since the 1970s. They deny care. They treat quotients. They actually don't even bury people. They have them stuck in cold storage for over a year, stuck literally in the side of a steel container because they won't bury the body. And they have these so-called proxies that are going to be taking care of their financial situation, taking 5% of all their money. This is really, really over the top. And then we have tons of veterans waiting for really essential care and can't get it. I mean, I can't remember how many times I talked to really tough military people who would break down and crying in my office, trying to get them care when I practiced in Denver. It's not hard dealing with difficult with sick patients. It's really hard dealing with impossible government and insurance carriers and knucklehead paper pushers that'll deny you because they have the power of the purse. It really is evil. And, when the doctor says something, it should just happen. This idea that we have pencil pushers doing it is evil.
Well, it is, and the bureaucrats are getting more and more power all the time under the Obama administration over the veterans and over the the issues of gun control and this sort of thing, declaring people mentally incompetent. And the law provides that you don't get put on the NICS list, the FBI list, unless you have been adjudicated to be mentally ill to the point of being a danger to yourself or others. Minor PTSD doesn't qualify for that. But the thing that bothers me the most is the adjudication process. Adjudication means in the law that you go before a judge and you have a hearing, or at least an administrative judge.
Right.
Obama's got Eric Holder is allowing anybody who works in the federal government to do this, to adjudicate a veteran as being mentally ill, to find them incompetent, and to put them on this list. Some veterans are being found to be incompetent to handle their own financial affairs because they lost an arm or a leg in combat. They're taking it as far as they can take it at this point. Well, not as far as they can take it, because the ultimate goal is to go after everybody. I mean, we talk about the veterans and losing their Second Amendment rights, but under the stuff I was talking about before the break, the proposed amendments to the VATF rules and regulations and the HHS rules, that's designed to go after the civilian population.
And people also don't understand
if you've ever seen a psychiatrist or taken certain medication, and to take away your right to keep and bear arms.
Now, one of the things that I found out, and this is through Tim Alexander, that when you apply for the new insurance under ACA, the Affordable Care Act, if you can't afford insurance now, and now you're trying to do ACA, you actually sign yourself off for Homeland Security to do a full background check, not just now but forever, and that you're going to have under all these kind of different rules you're talking about. So the Affordable Care Act actually places you into the microscope as well for all these evil things to happen to you as well. You've also listed in this article a number of specific things that Obama and the administration have done to mislead Congress and the American people. Do you want to go through some of these as well, because it gives you an idea of just the flavor of just how over the top this is? Like the Department of Justice's Operation Fast and Furious, many other things. Let's go through the list perhaps and talk about some of these issues.
Right. Well, he used executive privilege to block Congress from obtaining documents related to Operation Fast and Furious. And then he had members of his administration clearly provide false information about the act of terrorism committed in Benghazi on September 11, 2012. He refused to allow the State Department and other federal agencies to cooperate in the congressional investigation of the incident. He falsely labeled the mass murder of American soldiers at Fort Hood, Texas, as workplace violence instead of the act of Islamic terrorism that it was. And I'm talking about Major Hassan, who has now been sentenced to death, which, by the way, I doubt will ever be carried out as long as Obama's in office. But Obama has called that workplace violence, and because of that, the wounded veterans or the wounded members of the military, 34 of them, cannot get benefits they would be entitled to if this was classified as an act of terrorism, which it truly was. He's falsely misled the population about the IRS scandal. I mean, let's understand it. This man, every time a scandal breaks, he acts like he's never heard of any of this before. He doesn't know anything about it. Well, I just heard about this on the news, and I'm going to take care of it. Well, nobody's yet been fired in any of these scandals.
Right.
Lois Lerner with the IRS has been placed on administrative leave, as is the head of the VA in Phoenix, where veterans were being basically left to die.
Right.
They are on administrative leave. They're getting full salaries and full benefits, and they don't have to do anything. You know, it must be really nice. But he is always telling the people in this country that he didn't know anything about this. Well, let me tell you about the VA situation. He knew in 2009, because I know he was briefed on the fact that the situation with the VA medical centers was deteriorating. Instead of responding to that, what he did is start ordering the VA, and I've heard this directly from whistleblowers inside the VA, started ordering the VA to cut back on medical care and to concentrate on disarming the American veterans that are in the system. And then, you know, you have the Department of Justice trying to intimidate American reporters and other reporters by, you know, basically reading their phone logs and this sort of thing. You have the IRS now preparing to adopt regulations which would basically shut down organizations like the U.S. Justice Foundation as far as taking part in anything in the election cycle. We don't endorse candidates, but we do talk about issues. We do talk about voting records of candidates, and we talk about the legal issues involved. I would not be able to do that for 60 days prior to this upcoming election. In fact, on my own talk radio show, I would not be allowed to talk about anything but gardening. I couldn't come on your show and talk about this stuff. I can't do any blogs. I can't do any public speeches. All of this is coming down the pike from the IRS.
You're kidding.
No.
Oh my gosh.
We filed an opposition memorandum to that, too. And they're basically going to do this to all 501c3 and 501c4 conservative groups. Liberal groups are specifically exempt from this. Like the labor unions and their groups, they can do whatever they want, but we're not going to be allowed to participate in the election cycle if these go through.
Now, they haven't gone through yet, though.
No, they're proposed, but I can guarantee it could be any day now because of the fact that what they're going to do is they're going to wait till close to the time of the election, when that 60 days prior to the election kicks in. Then they will impose those on the American people.
Are they going to do them as executive orders or as a Senate order? Because the Congress certainly wouldn't do it.
No, it won't be Congress. It'll just be the IRS new regulations.
So, in other words, this is how Obama rules now. He doesn't even rule by proper legislation. He rules by executive order and by basically rule by changing rulemaking. Or just phoning his buddies and say, let's do this illegal and corrupt and conniving thing. And they just do it. I mean, that's really mind-boggling. It's a lawlessness that's hard to comprehend.
Well, it is, but that's the way the game is played. And what they're going to do, like I said, they're going to wait until just before the 60-day cycle starts prior to the election. They're going to implement these rules, and they're going to hope that no federal judge is going to take action to stop the implementation of it, and they'll be able to drag it out in court and continue to enforce this and steal the election in 2014, because that's ultimately what they're after with everything they're doing, attacking Texas and other states that have voter ID.
I think that we need civil.
When the Supreme Court has said we are entitled to do that, you know,
we need massive civil disobedience. If they try to push this through, massive civil disobedience to unreasonable and unconscionable rulemaking is what needs to be done.
I agree. And that's what
amazing. USJF.net, amazing discussion today. I am glad I'm sitting down so I wouldn't fall down. You got to read these articles, everyone. You got to find out how desperate it is. Contact your politicians, rattle their cage, get things going here. You've got contacts, and you probably have some specific action plans on the site as to what you want people to do, but they need to donate as well to support your foundation. They need to get involved politically now, because this election is so critical, this midterm election. We need to start, as they say, removing the head of the turkey, the head of the snake, and that's an abominectomy, and get rid of his administration.